My name's Olivia, and I'm 32 years old, working as an art teacher at a high school in Oregon. For as long as I can remember, I've always believed that family is irreplaceable, especially the special connection I had with my grandmother. She's the one who taught me how to make mint tea, embroider handkerchiefs, and appreciate the way sunlight dances through glass windows. But that belief was shattered just a week after she passed away. Grandma, Margaret, had lived in an old farmhouse that dated back to the early 1900s. It had a large porch and a garden filled with the sweet scent of lavender. She used to tell me, "This house will be yours, Olivia. You're the only one who truly sees it with your heart." Her words always felt like a soft whisper carried by the evening breeze, especially as I stood on the worn steps, clutching the envelope from the lawyer's office. The lawyer had just finished reading Grandma's will, clearly stating that the house was to be mine. But before I could process it, my mother, Linda, casually reached for the keys on the table, as if she had every right to them. "I know you're upset, but let's be realistic, Olivia," she said, her voice sweet as honey but colder than ice. "This house needs too many repairs. Your father and I just want to save you from the hassle." I looked from her to my father, John, who lowered his gaze, avoiding my eyes, his hands tightly clasped in front of him. They were talking about my grandmother's house, the place I spent every summer, like it was just another object to discard. "I don't need to be saved," I said, my voice shaking. "Grandma left me this house. It's in the will. I have a right to it." From the corner of the room, my brother, Ethan, let out a scoff. Leaning against the doorway with his arms crossed, he didn't even bother hiding the smirk on his face. "Soph, do you even know how high the property taxes are? With your teacher salary, keeping this house is a dream." The smell of lavender still hung in the air. Just weeks ago, Grandma and I had sat in that very room, sipping tea while she smiled and shared stories of her first love. Now, I stood there watching my family tear apart her legacy like it was nothing more than a pile of sale items. "You can't do this," I said, my voice barely audible, choking with emotion. "Actually, my sister, Grace, interjected, her face showing no guilt. "Mom and Dad have the legal right to the estate. They have power of attorney. The deal's already done." My heart sank. "What deal?" "We've found a buyer," my mother answered quickly, adjusting her silk collar as if everything was already settled. "It's a great offer above market price. The papers are signed. There's nothing left to discuss." I clenched the envelope in my hand. I hadn't opened it yet, following Grandma's instructions to wait until after the will reading. The envelope had been sent by Grandma's lawyer, with clear instructions: only open after everything has been said. "Get out of my grandmother's house," I said, my voice almost a whisper, but it felt as if time itself stopped. "Stop being dramatic, Olivia," my father finally spoke, his voice dry. "We're still a family." I let out a hollow laugh that echoed through the silence. Families don't do this to each other. One by one, they left the house, and I could see the relief on their faces. My mother was the last to leave, but she paused at the door. With a sly tone, she said, "We're meeting the buyer tomorrow to hand over the keys. You should come. It'll be easier for you to face reality." When the door clicked shut, I was left standing in the stillness. I sank into Grandma's floral armchair and carefully opened the envelope. Inside, I found a folded piece of paper and a small brass key. "My dearest Olivia, if you're reading this, then everything has gone as I expected. But don't worry, I've left you something they don't know about. It will help you take back what's yours. Look beneath the third brick on the garden wall, the one with the carved sparrow. Love will always find its way, as long as you have enough faith." My heart raced as I gripped the brass key. Grandma always said that truth doesn't need to shout, it just needs someone brave enough to listen. It was clear now that she had prepared for every scenario, and it was my turn to take action. Slowly, I stood, still clutching the key in my hand. The sun was dipping behind the trees, casting a warm, golden glow on the walls of the house. This house still had stories left to tell, and I was determined to be the one to hear them until the very end. By the time I stepped into the garden, darkness had already settled in. Holding a small flashlight and the key Grandma left for me, I walked into the cool, early evening air. It made me shiver, but the fire in my heart was burning brighter than the chill. Every step on the moss-covered stone path reminded me of summers spent watering the plants with Grandma, picking up petals that had fallen, listening as she shared the secrets grown-ups often hide in plain sight. I stopped at the old stone wall at the edge of the garden, the same spot where she would sit for hours, quietly embroidering. In the fading light, I ran my fingers across the bricks, feeling for the carved sparrow. After a few minutes, my fingers found the smooth curve of a brick, exactly as she had described, a sparrow with its wings spread wide. Gently, I pried at the brick, and to my surprise, it came away with ease. Inside, tucked into vintage-patterned silk fabric, was a small tin box. My heart raced again. Inside the box, I found a thick bundle of documents tied with a blue ribbon, a USB drive, and a note written by hand. "My dear Olivia, they will try to take everything from you, but they don't know I've already thought of everything. Inside these pages is a truth that no law can ignore. Take them to my lawyer, Hannah Lee. Trust no one else but her. Love, Grandma Margaret." The next morning, without hesitation, I drove to Hannah's office, a small but sophisticated building nestled in the heart of the city. Miss Lee, a sharp-eyed woman in her early 40s with brown hair pinned neatly back, greeted me. As I placed the documents on her desk and explained everything, she was silent for a long moment before starting to flip through the papers. After just a few minutes, her expression shifted. "Olivia," she said seriously, "your grandmother was extremely thorough. This document is a legally binding codicil to the original will. It was notarized 6 months before her passing." I sat up straighter in my chair. "Does it say anything specific?" She nodded. "There's a very clear clause. The house cannot be sold without your signed consent, which must be verified by a third party. Me. Despite your parents having power of attorney, this clause overrides any decisions made to prevent conflicts of interest." I held my breath. But they told me the deal was done. They even gave me a copy of the sale agreement with my signature. Hannah turned another page, then slid a photocopy of the contract across the desk to me. The signature at the bottom was mine, but it didn't take me long to notice it wasn't in my handwriting. The S was formed in that familiar swooping style my mother always used. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. "Can this be proven as a forgery?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Absolutely," Hannah replied confidently. "If you can prove you weren't here when the papers were signed, this isn't just an unauthorized sale. It's signature fraud, and the legal consequences could be severe." I tightened my grip on the papers. I was in Denver that day. I have the plane ticket, hotel receipts, even social media check-ins. I have everything. She offered a small smile. "Then we have the upper hand." Just then, my phone buzzed. I checked the screen. It was a message from Grace. "Mom knows what you're doing. Don't push yourself out of the family." I held the phone up to Hannah, who simply smirked. A classic reaction from someone who's scared. You should be ready when confronted with the truth. Some people go to extremes you wouldn't expect. We immediately began to formulate a plan. Hannah would send a legal notice to the buyer, halting the property transfer, and request a forensic analysis of the signature. I would gather all the evidence that proved I was out of town that day, and I'd keep Grandma's documents hidden until Hannah confirmed my legal claim to the house. But when I returned to Grandma's house later that afternoon, I didn't expect to find the locks had been changed. A crude note was taped to the oak door, "No entry. Property now under buyer's management." I stood there, hands buried deep in my coat pockets, while inside me, a quiet but fierce determination began to spark. Did they really think a locked door could undo everything Grandma left me? I pulled out my phone and shot a message to Hannah. "They changed the locks, but I'm not backing down. Let's move forward." I had never felt more sure of anything. This wasn't just about a house anymore, it was a wake-up call. The people you think are closest to you are often the ones most willing to erase you if it serves their purpose. But I, Olivia Bennett, would not let that happen. By Monday morning, I found myself back in Hannah Lee's office. She was already there, her eyes sharp, filled with purpose, as if she'd been preparing for a fight since the crack of dawn. "The buyer's name is Aaron Mitchell," she said as I sat down. "He's a real estate investor from Sacramento. He's wired a deposit and plans to finalize the sale in 3 days." I frowned, uneasy. Does he know I didn't sign the sale papers? Hannah shook her head. There's no sign that he knows, but we'll find out. I've arranged a meeting with him here this afternoon. You need to be there. At 2:30 p.m., Aaron entered tall, polished, his light blue shirt pressed perfectly, exuding the kind of calm confidence that only comes with being in control. But when his eyes met mine, that confidence faltered just for a split second. You must be Olivia? He asked, sitting next to Hannah. I nodded. Yes, my grandmother's house, the one you're trying to buy. Hannah opened a file and slid the sale contract in front of him. Mr. Mitchell, this is the agreement you signed with Olivia's family. However, there's a serious issue. The signature of the legal owner has been forged. Aaron frowned, scanning the signature. Is it hers? I spoke up firmly. That signature is not mine, and I was in Denver the day the contract was signed. I have proof. A tense silence followed. Aaron met my eyes, then glanced at Hannah. You're saying it's forged? They signed for her. Not just forged, Hannah replied with conviction. They violated a notarized codicil to the will. It clearly states that the house cannot be sold without Olivia's direct consent, verified by me. This contract is entirely invalid. Aaron leaned back, clearly shocked. They told me you agreed. They said you were too busy to attend the signing. I gave a slight, tight smile. They also said the house was just a burden nobody wanted. Aaron paused, his expression shifting from confusion to suspicion. I don't like being caught in the middle of lies. If this contract's invalid, I want no part in it. Hannah offered a small, reassuring smile. We're not asking you to go through with the deal. But if you're willing to clarify what you were told by the sellers, it could have legal importance. He thought for a moment, then nodded. I've got nothing to hide. I'll cooperate. But you should know, over the past few weeks, your mother kept pushing me to sign fast. She said there was a financial urgency, and if I hesitated, she'd find another buyer. I glanced at Hannah. She wanted to rush everything before I found out. Aaron nodded and pulled out his phone. I've got the entire chain of emails and texts. I can print them and provide a statement if needed. Hannah quickly scribbled notes. We'll need everything, both the content and the timestamps, especially anything that mentions Olivia. Aaron picked up a folder he had brought with him. There's also this. There's a line where she says, "We are the rightful heirs. The girl won't be able to interfere. This deal is for the good of the whole family." A cold tightness filled my chest. It was a short statement, but it was deliberate and cutting. To them, I was just an obstacle standing in the way of their deal. Aaron looked up, his gaze softening. I'm truly sorry. If I had known something was off, I wouldn't have gotten involved. I nodded, trying to suppress the bitterness. It's not your fault. You were used, just like I was. Hannah neatly gathered the documents. Thank you, Aaron. Your testimony and evidence will be crucial moving forward. He stood, shaking our hands with a firm grip. If you need anything else, just reach out. I don't want to be part of something that takes what doesn't belong to anyone. Once he left, the office was quiet again. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the file on the desk, still processing everything. So they really went this far, I said, my voice slow and heavy. Forcing my signature, lying to the buyer, pushing me out of my own grandmother's home. Hannah met my gaze, her expression as determined as ever. And now, it's time for you to take back what's rightfully yours. They didn't expect you to fight back. I pressed my lips together, standing up with a new sense of purpose. I won't let my grandmother down. They think they can erase everything with a few documents, but they've forgotten something important. Hannah raised an eyebrow. What's that? I turned to face her, feeling the weight of my decision. A real legacy doesn't live in property, it lives in truth. And I'm going to make sure that truth comes to light. Later that evening, I got a call from someone I never expected to come through for me, Grace, my sister. Always the picture of composure, always backing up our parents, always defending them without a second thought. But her voice on the phone sounded unlike her usual self. It was soft, hesitant, unsure. Olivia, can we meet? This is serious. I paused for a moment, confusion swirling. Where? Lantern Cafe, corner of 5th and Maple. Don't tell anyone in the family. 30 minutes later, I stepped into the cafe, a mix of emotions gnawing at me, caution, anger, and a flicker of curiosity. Grace was already seated in the corner, hands wrapped tightly around a coffee cup, her eyes lost in the reflection of the window as if trying to escape what was real. When she saw me, she quickly stood and pulled out a chair. I don't even know where to begin, she said, her voice so quiet I had to lean in to catch the words. Start with the truth, I said, coldly. Grace took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she spoke. I went through some papers in Mom's drawer. There are things in there that don't match the will you and the lawyer have. My pulse quickened. What do you mean? They altered some documents. Mom has a fake version of the will. There's also a financial file, shady loans, questionable bills. Olivia, I think Dad's company is under investigation. They need money fast, which is why they tried to sell Grandma's house. I felt a cold knot settle in my stomach. I'd suspected something like this, but hearing it from Grace made it all too real. And the signature on the house sale contract. Grace looked down, her guilt evident. Ethan signed it. Mom convinced him. They said it was the only way to save the company from going under. I clenched my fists. So, they think it's okay to just forge legal documents. Grace didn't answer, but her silence said everything. There's more, she continued. They've planned a meeting with a new buyer at the Regency Hotel next Friday night, 8 p.m., room 746. They're trying to renegotiate the deal, offering additional assets. I frowned. What assets? I'm not sure, she said, glancing around nervously. But Mom mentioned high-value items, maybe the things Grandma kept hidden. Paintings, jewelry, or something important you haven't found yet. I nodded slowly, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. Why are you telling me all this? I asked. Grace bit her lip, her eyes pleading. Because I can't stand by anymore. Mom's always wanted everything to go her way, but this time they've gone too far. Grandma left that house to you, and I know she did it because she trusted you to protect it. I can't keep pretending I don't see what's happening. I looked at her, seeing the vulnerability in her eyes that had never been there before. Do you want to help? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. I nodded, my voice firm. Would you testify if this goes to court? Grace hesitated for a moment, then nodded, determination flashing in her eyes. Yes. I pulled out my phone and texted Hannah, new info, secret meeting at Regency Hotel, room 746, 8 p.m. Friday. Bring recording equipment. The reply came back almost instantly, received. Ready. I'll meet you before the meeting. I looked up at Grace, my voice soft but full of gratitude. Thank you. Even if it's late, you made the right choice. She smiled faintly, her voice tinged with sadness. Grandma always said, choosing what's right late is better than never at all. Maybe it's time I finally listened to her. That Friday evening, Hannah and I arrived at the Regency Hotel right on schedule. We rented room 745 on the 7th floor, directly adjacent to the room where the secret meeting was set to take place. Hannah quickly set up the recording device into the wall outlet, and I pressed my ear to the thin wall, as if waiting for the truth to break through. My mother's voice came first, cold, calculated, like a machine processing a transaction. We only have tonight. The auditors are going through the books on Monday. If the money isn't in the business account by then, they'll start digging. A man's voice followed, likely my father's, low and full of irritation. We can't let everything fall apart because of that girl. My mother exhaled sharply. Olivia won't know a thing. The buyer agreed to keep quiet if we hand over all of Margaret's hidden valuables. My breath caught in my throat. Valuables? Behind the built-in cabinet in the library, Mom continued, her voice even colder. Margaret had a collection of pre-war artisan crafts worth hundreds of thousands. I glanced at Hannah. She had recorded everything, and I could see the satisfaction in her eyes. We've got everything we need, she whispered. Now, we bring it to light. I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. My family had abandoned every moral line to hold on to things that no longer belonged to them. But they had forgotten one thing: I wasn't the naive little girl I used to be. Grandma trusted me, and I wouldn't betray that trust. The voices from room 746 filtered through the paper-thin wall, each word slicing through the memories I once held dear. My mother's voice came again, this time stripped of its usual calm. We can't let anyone find the collection. If they trace the origin, it'll lead back to all the old transactions. If Olivia finds them, everything falls apart. I turned to Hannah, her eyes lighting up again as she scribbled notes in her notepad. What's this collection really about? I whispered. Hannah shook her head. We'll find out soon enough. My father's voice cut in. Are you sure they're still in the house? Margaret might have moved them somewhere else. No, my mother replied quickly, her tone almost sharp. She didn't have time, and she thought she could hide them longer, but I know that house better than anyone. The library room, the wall behind the bookshelf, there's a hidden compartment. We'll go there tomorrow before the auditors arrive. I heard footsteps, papers shuffling, and then the sound of water being poured. A new male voice, the buyer's representative, joined the conversation. But I need assurance. If those are truly antique paintings, their value is no less than $1 million. I won't transfer anything until they're verified. My mother's voice lowered, measured. You'll get the paintings, but you are not to contact anyone connected to Olivia. She no longer has any rights. Hannah gestured for me to stay quiet, then pointed to the clock, almost 8:30. She pulled out her phone and whispered, "We've got enough on tape. We need to leave before they wrap up." We slipped out of the hotel through the back elevator, careful not to draw attention. On the way back to the office, I didn't speak a word. I just held tightly to the bag containing the recording, the proof of a crime that had been concealed by my own family for years. Once we returned to the office, Hannah immediately began extracting the audio file, saving it onto 3 separate devices. She wasn't taking any chances. Do you think my grandmother knew about all of this beforehand? I asked, sinking into a chair, my eyes gazing out the window at the darkened city below. Hannah nodded. Without a doubt. Margaret didn't just revise her will, she specifically added a clause to block the sale. That tells me she knew exactly what they were planning. I swallowed hard, a sense of realization dawning on me. And she hid the paintings inside the wall because if they were found, your entire family could be investigated for tax evasion, money laundering, or worse, trafficking undocumented artwork. Hannah pulled out a drawer, rummaging through it before pulling out a list. Your grandmother had been in touch with an appraiser named Megan Taylor. This is a letter she wrote 6 months ago, listing several paintings, possibly from a collection that's been missing since the 1940s. I shivered, my voice barely a whisper. She knew what they were doing, and she tried to save everything in silence. Hannah paused, studying me for a moment before offering a small, reassuring smile. And she believed you'd be the one to protect that legacy when the time came. The next morning, we arrived at my grandmother's house, carrying a court-issued authorization and a temporary protection order to prevent anyone from interfering with the property during the legal dispute. The first person we encountered was my brother, Ethan, standing at the front door, his hands fumbling nervously with a set of keys. "What are you doing here?" I demanded, stepping in front of him, my voice sharp. Ethan froze, his eyes darting between Hannah and me. Mom said she needed something checked in the library. I was just following orders. And the forged signature on the sale contract, were you just following orders then, too? I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of disbelief and anger. Ethan's face tightened, and he bit his lip. "I'm sorry, Soph. I know I messed up. But everything was falling apart, the company, the debts. Mom said if we didn't come up with the money, there'd be an investigation, and the only solution was selling Grandma's last memory." I shook my head, unable to contain my frustration. "You had a choice, Ethan. And you picked the wrong side." Hannah stepped forward, holding the court order firmly in her hand. "From this moment on, all activity on this property requires written approval from Olivia. Any attempt to enter, remove, or alter anything inside will be considered a legal offense." Ethan dropped his gaze, resigned, and handed over the keys. I took them, feeling a mix of unease and determination. As I stepped into the house, the familiar scent of lavender still lingered in the air, and Grandma's portrait hung in the center of the room. But this time, I wasn't walking in as her granddaughter. I was stepping in as the one who would uncover the truth. We headed directly to the library, the room filled with antique books and soft light filtering through the windows. My fingers brushed against the wooden trim behind the third bookshelf, the very spot my mother had mentioned. A soft click echoed through the room, and a hidden compartment in the wall slowly creaked open. Hannah shone a flashlight inside, revealing 4 rolled-up paintings in protective tubes, a wooden box engraved with Margaret B., and a sealed envelope with a red wax stamp. I picked up the envelope, my hands trembling as I turned it over. In my grandmother's handwriting, it read, "For Olivia, when you're ready to face the truth." I opened it carefully, my heart pounding. Inside was a single note, written in her familiar script. "It's not the paintings, but the story behind them that must be protected. And the truth, no matter how long it's buried, will always find its light." I looked up at Hannah, my throat tight with emotion. She gave me a small, encouraging smile. "We're going to bring that truth into the light." And in that moment, I knew the fight had only just begun. 3 days later, we submitted all the evidence to the Portland City Police. Hannah personally presented the audio recording of the meeting, a copy of the forged sale contract, and the list of valuable paintings my grandmother had hidden, works suspected to be tied to an illegal art trafficking network dating back to the 1990s. The lead investigator, Mr. Samuel Scott, was calm, his sharp eyes scanning every detail. After reviewing the file and listening to the entire recording, he looked up and said, "There's enough here to open a criminal investigation. If these paintings match the list, this is no longer just a civil matter." That evening, he asked us to accompany him to the Arlington Hotel, where my parents were set to meet the buyer for the transfer of the hidden art collection. Hannah discreetly slipped a recording device into her coat pocket, and I prepared my phone for video. Grace, now fully committed, joined us, clutching a folder of documents she'd quietly copied from our mother's office. She was the first in the family to break the silence, and now, she was determined to see it through. We arrived at the meeting room on the 14th floor just as my mother was pulling a fabric-wrapped painting from a suitcase. The unfamiliar man, likely the collector, reached for the frame but froze when he saw us standing at the door. My mother turned around, her face going ashen as she saw me, Hannah, and Grace entering. "What is this?" she asked, her voice steady, but her hand gripped her bag strapped tightly, betraying the unease beneath her calm exterior. "This," I said, raising my phone with a steady hand, "is the truth, and this time, it's not staying hidden." My father moved forward, trying to block me, his expression a mix of desperation and fear. "Olivia, you're walking into something much worse than you think. This isn't what you imagine." "Isn't what I imagine?" I scoffed, turning to the buyer. "Did you know the pieces you're planning to buy are listed as missing since 1948, according to the National Art Crime Database?" The man's hand jerked back, his eyes widening in shock. "Excuse me?" Hannah didn't hesitate. She pulled out the letter of authentication from Megan Taylor, the expert who had verified the paintings. "The painting you're holding is one of several reported missing from a private collection in France belonging to a Jewish family. If you go through with this transaction, you could be prosecuted for participating in an illicit deal." Before anyone could speak, the door burst open. Police flooded the room, with Inspector Scott leading the team. "Everyone stay where you are," he commanded. His team quickly began collecting paintings, documents, and anything that might serve as evidence. My parents stood frozen in shock, while Grace stood by me, her gaze unwavering as she watched our mother. "I used to think you were doing this for the family, but I was wrong," Grace said, her voice thick with emotion. "You were only trying to hold on to your power." My mother turned her eyes to her eldest daughter, her voice icy but somehow weary. "I did everything for you." "No," I interjected, my voice firm. "You did everything to bury the truths that this family has buried for too long. But today, that ends." My father slowly sank into a chair, defeated. "Your mother didn't lie," he muttered, his voice hollow. "We made mistakes, but we did it to protect the company. Our name." Inspector Scott cut him off. "Mr. Bennett, We have evidence your company used fake invoices, shipped counterfeit art to Europe, and smuggled authentic pieces through furniture import routes. This is organized money laundering. And protecting your family doesn't exempt you from the law. The door opened again, and Ethan, my brother, stepped in. He looked at no one but me, his expression tight. "Olivia," he said, his voice more resigned than I had ever heard, "I'm here to make a statement. Mom and Dad didn't act alone. There are other partners involved. I have documents." Hannah moved quickly to collect the stack of papers from him. I looked at Ethan, the same person who once forged my signature, and quietly asked, "Why the change of heart?" He exhaled deeply, his shoulders sagging. "Because I can't keep pretending anymore. Grandma did everything she could for us. For me. I always followed Mom's lead, but now I realize that staying silent is just as bad as enabling it." Inspector Scott took the documents, asking Ethan to stay for a full report. The buyer quietly slipped out of the room, leaving behind all his documents and confirming his willingness to cooperate with the investigation. As the police continued their work, I walked over to my mother. She stood there, arms crossed, her expression devoid of anger, just exhaustion. "Why you?" she asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. I met her gaze, my voice steady but filled with quiet strength. "Because Grandma trusted me. Because I never saw that house as just property. It was a memory, a last proof of honesty in a family that got too comfortable hiding things." She didn't say anything more. Hannah signaled for me to leave, and we made our way out as officers sealed the art crates. Grace gave my hand a gentle squeeze as we exited the hotel. Ethan followed silently behind us, his eyes focused on the unraveling of everything he had once protected. But inside, I knew this wasn't the collapse of everything, it was the awakening of a long-hidden truth, and I wasn't going to let it be silenced again. 2 months after the raid at the Arlington Hotel, my life had irrevocably changed. My parents, Linda and David Bennett, were sentenced to 6 and 8 years in prison, respectively, after agreeing to cooperate with authorities and expose the full scope of their illegal art dealings. With federal investigators at the helm, more than 10 individuals were arrested, including 3 major business partners from my family's furniture company, individuals who had used wooden shipping containers as a front to smuggle art across international borders for nearly a decade. Bennett and Company, once my father's pride and joy, was officially dissolved. The remaining legal assets, including factories, trucks, and commercial properties, were liquidated by the court, and the majority of the funds were returned to my grandmother's estate. I was formally declared the sole heir to her entire personal estate, including the old house and the art collection, appraised at over $3.4 million by the insurance agency. I stood in the living room, the late afternoon sunlight streaming through the patterned glass windows, casting intricate reflections on the freshly painted white walls. Grace was dusting the bookshelf, and Ethan was closing the old wooden chest, the one he had once thought to hide the paintings in. Amid the quiet transformation, the 3 of us who had once been fractured, each of us carrying a heavy past, had rediscovered the truth Grandma had spent her life protecting. Family is not built on possessions but on truth. "I fixed the kitchen door," Ethan said softly, passing me with a glance that seemed more like an apology than a statement. I smiled faintly, the warmth of the moment settling in. "Thanks. This house has been waiting for that, hasn't it?" Grace stood upright, her hand resting on an old book, the one embroidered with our grandmother's name. "She left us more than we thought." I nodded, absorbing the weight of her words. "Not just paintings or property. She gave us the chance to start fresh, without the lies and the secrets. Every day spent in this house made me understand why she held on to everything. Beneath the old tile floors, there were the quiet echoes of our childhood. On the ceiling, still visible, was the faint crack she had pointed out one evening, saying, "It looks like a heart if you stand at just the right angle." And in every photo frame, every book, there were traces of a woman who, quietly and with grace, fought to preserve values far more lasting than wealth. On Friday afternoon, Hannah arrived with the final court confirmation. The house, all of its contents, and the insurance settlement from the paintings were now legally mine. She placed the thick file on the coffee table, the very spot where Grandma used to sit every afternoon, knitting handkerchiefs and sipping her tea. "Congratulations, Olivia," Hannah said, her voice soft but full of meaning. You kept your promise to her. I opened the file, scanning the red seals and signatures. No more disputes, no more forgeries, no more fears of what tomorrow would bring. I don't know what to say except thank you, I replied, feeling lighter than I had in years, like a burden had been lifted from my chest. Hannah hesitated for a moment, then pulled out a small envelope. There's one more thing you should know. This came from the archives, your grandmother's last letter, written just 1 week before she passed. I took the envelope and opened it carefully, feeling a surge of emotion. Her familiar handwriting appeared on cream stationery. My dearest Sophie, if you're reading this, then the secrets have likely come to light. I never wanted you to grow up with a heart full of doubt, but sometimes the truth needs time to rise. Keep this house as a place of healing, not just for you, but for all who've ever lost their way. I love you, Grandma. I folded the letter carefully, my eyes stinging but my heart filled with a quiet peace. Just then, the doorbell rang. It was Luke, the former art buyer, now an unexpected ally through everything that had happened. Hi, Olivia, he said with a soft smile, holding a carefully wrapped frame. I stopped by to return this. I believe it belonged to your grandmother. I unwrapped the package, a mixture of hope and curiosity rising within me. It was the small watercolor painting Grandma had always kept in her bedroom, a spring garden scene. I had always assumed it was just a print, but now, as I looked at it closely, each brushstroke was unmistakable. This was the original. Luke spoke gently. I had it appraised. Turns out, it was the debut piece of a well-known female artist from the 1920s. No signature, because your grandmother was her close friend. I laughed quietly, feeling a bittersweet joy. She hid her talent better than she hid old paintings. We hung the painting back in its original place, above the fireplace, where it belonged. The house, once full of secrets, now felt alive again, this time without any lies. Only love, memories, and the promise of new beginnings. As the orange glow of sunset filtered through the windows, I stood on the porch with Grace and Ethan. The three of us, once so broken, now found ourselves stitching back together with the invisible thread of forgiveness. Grandma was right, I said quietly, my voice filled with the weight of what we'd overcome. We can lose everything, but as long as we still have trust, we can rebuild. Grace squeezed my hand, her eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in years, sincerity and understanding. Ethan gave a small nod, his expression thoughtful. This house, which had once buried secrets, now held the most precious things of all, truth, love, and family, just as Margaret had always hoped. From my journey, I've learned that the most valuable legacy isn't money or rare paintings, it's the truth and the courage to protect what's right, even when betrayal comes from those we love. I chose to stand up, not for revenge, but to preserve the values my grandmother cherished. In the end, the house wasn't just protected, it became a place of healing, a new beginning, and proof that truth always finds its way into the light.